Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to my LCS 2026 Winter Cup Player Power Rankings. Alright, so this is going to be my All Pro, and then I'm going to do my power rankings for each role. This is going to be solely based on LCS Winter. Obviously, America's Cup is going on right now, but this is solely based on how players played within the LCS Winter. Obviously, some players that made it further along in the tournament are going to have more games, bigger sample size, are probably going to rank higher just because they won more and they had more games to play. But that's just sort of the nature of the format. And some players obviously subbed in uh, or came in late. So I'll give quantifiers and breakdowns for everything, but that's sort of how that's going to be. All right. So this is my All Pro. So I have in the top lane, or actually, let's go team by team. First team is Thanatos from C9, Inspired from Lion, Quad from FlyQuest, Berserker from Lion, Core JJ from Team Liquid. Second team is Dokla from Lion, Blabber from C9, Call Me from Disguised, Eon from TL, Yan, Vulcan from C9. Third team is Impact from Sentinels, Hanbok from Sentinels, APA from Cloud9, Masu from FlyQuest, and Huhi from Sentinels. Alright, so let's break down, starting with the top lane. Alright, so just to break down my rankings, or my tiers. I technically do have an S rank. I don't show it here because nobody in NA qualifies. S rank would be like, I think that they're the best player in the world, basically, right? They should be like, if they're not the best, they're like in that conversation for best player in the world. A tier is, I think they're like basically at a world level, they're going to be like the hard carry, right? They're going to be the carry player at like a world championship level, right? This is a player that's probably making it to like who's carrying games in worlds playoffs. B tier is like a world's competent player, right? On a worlds level team, they're probably like they could be like a role player on a worlds level team, but like they're not going to lose you the game on a worlds level team. In NA, they're probably like a carry player, right? In a lower region, they will be, they'll be a better player in a lower region. In a higher region, they'll be like a mid-table player. C tier is, I think, in my opinion, like an LCS LEC level player, right? I think they're good enough to be on like a tier one team, right? There's ranges. This sort of feels like a big tier where like a lot of people in C plus C minus, but like people sort of cusping of being in B tier or like being in D tier. But this is like a player I think deserves to be on like a tier one team. Within like LCS LEC, they're probably like you could see them on like a playoff level team. I think it would be fair to like they'd be they'd be a capable member on a playoff level team. They might not be the carry, but they might like if they're like you'd be okay with having them as like a third or fourth best player on your team. They're not going to carry you to like a championship, but they'll be a serviceable player. And then D tier, I think, is like somebody who's probably either not consistent enough or just like not mechanically good enough to be tier one. They should probably be in challenger. All right. So starting off, I have Thanatos and Impact in B tier. And the first thing you're gonna say is, wait, you had Dokla second place All Pro, but you have him in C tier in top lane. So I'll start with Thanatos. I think he was like by far the best laner. He did have games where like he got focused top lane and didn't do so well. I think it was game one versus Sentinels where they really like target focused him. But overall, I think he was like the most like consistent top laner in terms of laning. Um, I don't know if he contributed as much as I would like for a B tier in terms of like the having impact in the mid to late. But again, a lot of the times, because C9 was so far ahead, he just didn't even have a chance to make an impact. And then the games where they were behind, it was because like I don't know, Blabber like hella ran that shit. Blabber hella ran down like at least one of those games, you know. I would say he was like the least of their problems in that final series versus Lyon. So I have Thanatos as my best player. I did have Dokla second team All Pro even though he's in C tier, and that is because while I don't think he is, I think he gave Lyon a lot of success with his pocket picks with like the carry top laners, the ranged, right, the Varus, the Vayne, even like pulling out the Irelia, and I think they played well around him. So I think in terms of that impact, that's why I gave him second place, second All Pro. But I do think that only worked because they were playing in North America. I think if you take that to the world stage, um, I don't know if that's really gonna work against the Asian teams. If he's a good enough laner to pull that off against other opponents, I don't feel like he even pulled it. He didn't even do that much against C9, right? It was more so against like Sentinels or like TL, right? Um, so I don't know if he's gonna. I like what I saw, so I have him. I'm giving him his kudos for winter, but overall I still have him in C tier. But it's an upward trajectory, and I'm excited to see more and see if he really stacks up at the first international. Impact, I feel like is pretty good laner. I feel like in terms of laning, he's up there with Thanatos, right? I feel like he does have some. He did have like I think a Jax game where he like Omega ran it down, but I feel like he does pull up. Sentinels does like to give him a lot of priority in that top lane. They like to get him good picks, good counter picks, and I feel like he's just one of the better performing top laners. He has his like games off, but you know, with his career pedigree, I feel like he's a pretty good pick to have here in the B tier. C tier, a lot of the so some of these guys are good early and some of them are good late. I feel like they're all like they all have their moments where they like show their worth. And a lot of the times it's just that either their teams aren't that good or right like they don't get like much support, so as top lane they can't impact that much, or like yeah they just don't show up in the late game, etc., etc. I think Morgan, he had a really good Renekton game. Who was it against? I think it was against Castle or something, where he just like popped the fuck off. Like went ham in lane. I think he's good on the standard like top lane picks, but he got thrown off a lot against like Dokla with his off meta picks. Um, I feel like he's good in like very standard matchups, but I think he struggles a bit when the game doesn't follow the formula. Photon and Castle, I think Photon's like pretty good. I'd be almost willing to like bump him up. It's just that he's on like a dog water team, so like there's not that much. He doesn't have the opportunities to really show his true worth. I feel like he's a decent laner, and I do feel like on picks like the Renekton, he can find good like flanks or like CC stuns onto like flash Ws onto AD carries onto key targets. So I think he's a good player. I'd like to see him, or I'd like to see Dignahouse do better, so that he can have a good opportunity. Get him a better mid jungle, please. Castle, I feel like I'm like sometimes I go damn he's good, and sometimes I go damn maybe he's not that good. I feel like in terms of laning, sometimes he gets a little run down by some of the other guys in the C or B tier. But I do feel like he does find similar to Photon, he does find those like mid to late game like clutch catches and stuff, clutch flanks. So I like having him here in C tier. Fudge obviously didn't have the greatest split, but I think to a lot of the not a lot of, to a couple of the Shopify players, I'm gonna sort of say, hey, contracts was running, contracts basically just ran down your entire season. Like we saw you play like 3 series, so like I if contracts played better, I think he'd have more room to actually operate. I don't like his Gnar counter pick into Renekton's wasn't good, but I feel like a lot of players did that counter pick and it didn't look good. So I don't think he performed particularly well, but I don't think like anything was particularly his fault. So I'm fine. I had him in B tier last split. He didn't. I think if he was B tier, I'd like to see a little bit more. But I'm fine with keeping him in C tier. I don't feel like anything was his fault. D tier was Gakko's. I feel like he was the one player of FlyQuest that was, well, we'll talk about Griffin later when we get to jungle. But I feel like he was constantly not performing to the level of his lane opponents. Part of that is that the top lane is I feel like actually surprisingly we have a pretty good top lane, right? Pool right now. Everybody's in like at least C tier besides him, so it is a tough split to be a top laner, to be a semi rookie top laner. But he did look like the worst top laner in the league, so he's D tier. But give him some time. Give him and the whole FlyQuest roster some time for growth. In another world, in a more experienced lineup, he could just be a weak side top laner, similar to like Dokla in the beginning of the split, right? In the beginning of the split, Dokla they just left him on an island to get tower dove all game, and I was like, damn, he's bad. And then later on, they gave him resources, let Saint just play stable, and then he's like, oh, he's actually really contributing a lot. So I do feel like they do give Gakko's resources, and he doesn't do anything with them though. But I feel like he definitely deserves to be in D, but with more experience on their roster, I feel, he has. I would not sell him out until I'd give him another split, or knowing Papa Smithy with FlyQuest, they'd give him at least a year or two. So, looking forward to see the growth. All right, next for jungle, Inspire was just the Western jungle goat. He just does everything, man. I don't know. His Nocturne is Omega cracked. The champs he picks, he plays the Malphite. I wasn't crazy about his Malphite, but I think just in general, in terms of where he is on the map, he's not the most. He will have games where he ganks early, but he's not the most proactive early game jungler. But just in terms of where he is on the map, how he holds his cooldowns, is just elite. He just sort of runs the game. I don't know how else to say it. Blabber looked really good until that final series, right? He was destroying Griffin. The issue is that half of the series was like against Griffin, where he like jungle gapped him, but then Griffin also got jungle gapped by Inspired. And then obviously he had that game against Inspired that he utterly ran down in the grand finals. So I think Blabber's still he's still the player that we always knew him to be, aka if he gets a lead, he can shove that game, he can snowball that to the extreme and shove it down your throat. But if he falls behind, it might get a little dicey. I feel like he's not great. Also, because I do think he is a big shot caller on C9 historically. If he's behind, then that also hurts their shot calling a lot. Hopefully that's better with APA, but if you've been watching America's Cup, it's still a little ugh. But yeah, so Ivan B tier, I think even on like a world level, if he gets that lead, he can snowball that game a lot, but he can also run it down if you're well prepared against him. Hambach, I think, has been a big high point for me on Sentinels. I think he looked good early in the Swiss and etc. But I was like, oh, we don't really, these junglers are like just okay. But then even against, I feel, Blabber and Inspired, he was getting a lot of good ganks off early, having a good impact on the jungle. The one thing to note is he did. This might be more of a team macro thing, but like he went for a lot of early dragons and he did secure a lot of early objectives for his team. But then C9 or Lion would just sort of rotate and get like turret gold instead while he took dragon, and then that would get like their ADC or their mid laner fed, and then they just like snowball that into running over the game. That might be more of a macro thing, but I did like to see him very active early Hambach. So I, even in the face of like what I think are the two best junglers in North America, so I like having him here in B tier. C tier, I think Jose Deodo, I've said it many times, is sort of the, he is the bar, sort of. He's very average. I feel like he does his jungle clear, and then if he does the jungle clear that he's supposed to do, and then if the objective is there, he will do it. If it's not, then he just goes back along his way. I mean, they are pathed so that their objective will be there, and it's just if his team is prepared for it, right? So that could be like the dragons, or like going for a bot dive if Jan and Core JJ have pushed it in. They like that a lot. But if you're a good jungler and you're proactive, he's pretty easy to read, I feel, and you can find a lot of things. I think the key point is sometimes in certain picks, right, with like I think when Quid plays Rise, then they do have good mid jungle synergy and they find plays around the map. But outside of certain picks where he synergizes in that way, I think he's bang average. A good jungler will beat him and a bad jungler will lose to him. That's sort of what it is. So looking forward, I'd like to see more proactive, synergistic plays out of him. Griffin, I think, is really tough because we saw him against like Contracts having the worst series of his life, and then DSG's sub jungler Kisno, who looked not coordinated with his team. So we're like, oh, Griffin's really good, and then we saw him play Blabber twice and then Inspired, and then we're like, damn, he's running it down harder than anybody has ever run it down. And that's tough because we basically saw him against the worst players and then against the best players. Realistically, hopefully, he's somewhere in the middle. It would have been nice to see him against some of the other mid-table opposition, and we'd have a better idea of how good he is. But hopefully he learns to not just Omega run it down. But I'm going to leave him in C tier, but he's definitely a player I need to see more of. Same with Carrera. He came in really late, right? The first two series of Swiss they played with Kisno. He looked decent from like, we saw him in a best of 3 and then a best of 5, basically. One best of 3, one best of 5. He looked decent, but I think the sample size is really small. And I need to see more before I really make any decisions. XU, I think, was just like not good. Him and Battlefox, I think, are the most dog water mid jungle duo you could have. I didn't think he was even good on Disguise when Disguise was like top 6, so yeah. Kisno, I think, I put him here just cause, but he was just the sub. He had a decent first series. Second series, just kind of a losing factor. Didn't look coordinated with the team, but he was an emergency sub, filling in for 2 weeks. It is what it is. He can have another chance down the road. I think that's fine. I don't think like you have to be like, damn, he doesn't deserve to be in LCS. Like, it was tough circumstances. Contracts, I mean, he was easily the worst player in the league this split. He straight lost like, I think like every Shopify game. Like the Malphite game was atrocious. It made me never want to see Jungle Malphite ever again. And even all the other games, like playing against Jose Deodo, Jose would just do his regular clear, and then Contracts would just always be nowhere close to the objective on his jungle path, and it was like, damn, bro, you're just gonna lose every single objective for free. So I mean, if Contracts has been good in the past, so if he can get his shit together, then Shopify can actually be relevant. But If he plays like how he played this split, then no, you know. All right, mid lane. I think mid lane was a little. I was hyped at the beginning, and then it sort of simmered down. I think Quad was pretty good. He was very consistent. Even when FlyQuest was falling apart, it was like, damn, Quad's trying his best to like carry. But when Griffin's just inting, what can you do, you know? Um, so yeah, I feel like Quad was consistent, good player. Even when other players against him were popping off, he would still be like a big contributor. Probably the best player on his team. Probably, in my opinion, the best mid laner in the LCS. Then we have Call Me and APA. I was sort of flip flopping with these two. I think they're very similar but very opposite. I think Call Me is incredibly cracked mechanically when I was watching in the beginning of Swiss. And APA, I feel like, has really good map movements, right? He's really good at playing around Blabber with like the Talia or the Ziggs. Picks where he can sort of roam a lot, the Rise. But both these players, I think, faltered in the playoffs once we moved from best of 3 to best of 5, because I think they have limited champion pools. Originally with APA, I was like, oh, he has a limited champion pool, but if he can, he's still like good on these picks. And then we saw him defaulting to the Annie in like a game 2, game 3. It's like, bro, like if you're playing Annie game 2, game 3, like actually he did that too in the TL one. Now that I'm thinking about it, with TL and Summer. So I think obviously he does have a decent pool where he is actually world elite, which is why I have him in B tier. But you know, if you're defaulting to Annie in a game 2, game 3, that's not great. I think his champion pool issues are real. I haven't watched the America's Cup yet, so I'll see if it carries over there. But that's a real issue. Same with Call Me. I don't know why his Talia looked absolutely cracked, and then he stopped picking it in the later, and like it looked like he didn't want it in their best of 5. But I think he was super mechanically cracked, and then I feel like his champion pool preference got a little exposed when we moved to best of 5. And it kind of showed that he only wanted to play like 3 or 4 champions, and then once we got further in, he didn't look as comfortable. But you know, in a world where we're not playing best of 5s, I think both him and APA can still be at a world level. You know, it's just once we move to an actual like playoff bracket, then there's question marks. Quid, I mentioned it with Jose Diodo earlier. I feel like he was just not that impactful, right? He has a good team around him, so like he should be doing more than he is, right? When he has that rise, when he has a couple picks where he can synergize with Jose, then he looks like he's B tier. But outside of that, he's pretty quiet. He's not been having the series that he should be as a former LCS MVP. And I think, yeah, I have him in C tier as a result. Darkwings, I think he's not mechanically that insane, but you know, he knows his role, he knows his job. He just plays safe control mages, plays safe. He's lost a couple lane phases, couple games. Like I think there was a cast one that was bad, but besides, he's typically very consistent. He just plays safe. If he has a good angle, he'll go for the angle. He'll go for like a super obvious angle, but he's not going to do anything crazy, but he's going to do his job, DPS, and play safe and consistent. Froggen style, you know? Zinni, I think, he was terrible in Swiss. I had him D tier originally. But as we moved into playoffs, he learned, hey, if I just play safe and don't end the game, I just play safe and consistent, like how Darkwings plays, then, you know, we can actually win, right? We'll let Dokla have some more jungle, some jungle pressure. Let Inspired actually do his thing without me running down mid, and we can actually like win the split, win the cup, Winter Cup. I still think he had some like int moments, but overall he played well. I think he learned to play safe and consistent enough, and when he does that, then he can actually find like actual plays later on. Like to just similar to Dark Wings to just capitalize on like a misplay. So I have him at like the bottom of C tier. I think he benefits a lot from having the best jungler in the league, but you know, I think I'm fine where he is. Zinni, I think, similar to Fudge, it's tough playing with contracts entering the game. I think looked really tough. He looked really rough at the start of Swiss. By the end, he didn't look like he was really like actively contributing, but he wasn't like losing them the games either. He was just like there. I think give him some more time, let contracts play better, and then we could see him like move up. I could see him like being decent. Palafox, I mean, come on, he's like him. Here's the thing: Palafox can actually find you like game-winning plays in the mid to late game. The issue is that him and the team are usually so far behind by that point that it doesn't actually it doesn't even matter that he found the play. So, yeah, his mechanic, his laning, his early game is just so bad that we can't even get to the point of him. Right, with like Shopify, they were at least able to get right because Fudge and Contracts were playing well. They were able to like get to that point. Here, yeah, it's tough. It's tough. ADC, I think Berserker and Yan are like Omega cracked. I have Berserker higher because I feel like Yan has a better support. Right, I think CoreJJ is miles better than Isles. Hee. And yet Berserker was still able to go even or even like win a couple of those lanes in that matchup. So I think I have to have Berserker higher. I think he does get caught a little. Berserker does get caught a little bit in fights, but teams have to use so much to get to him that like it actually wins them the fight somehow. So I have Berserker as my best ADC. Yan I think is also cracked. I think the biggest issue with TL is that they've been kind of uncoordinated for some reason. Like I see Yan go for great angles, but then his teammates are not on the same. Like Morgan won't be on the same page, or like Quid will go for a different target when he walks up to fight. So, and then I think he also like tilts when his team is doing bad. I think Yan is a notable tilter if he feels like he's playing well and his teammates are not. But I think, if TL's issues are more teamwork and macro than it is individual mechanics. Masu, I think, is great, still a great player. I think his team's issue is Griffin, and then macro and ADC is not really going to be part of that. But him and Cryogen, I think, were one of the better. I think besides TL's, I think they were like the best bot lane as a complete like duo. Obviously, I think Zerker is better, but I think he also carries Isles. So I like Masu still being here in B. FBI and Rahel, I swapped them around a lot. I think they're both like pretty solid ADCs. They're not always the most impactful. They're not like I don't think they're as good in lane as the guys above them, but they're also not bad. They will carry games. I think Rahel does get caught a little bit sometimes, which is why I have them below FBI. But I think they're like both like serviceable ADCs. B-Boy I think has been serviceable in the past. Obviously, I think he plays with a terrible support, and Shopify with contracts has not been good. So I'm just gonna leave him here. Sven and Sajed. Obviously, everybody's bandwagoning hating on Sven now after like the Lion series and then after the America's Cup. I've always been pretty low on him, even when C9 was doing well. People would see him like have mega kill games and be like, "Oh, he's so good." He's actually like a really good team fighter, but I feel like he always has at least once or twice a series he'll have a game where he just gets randomly caught. And it's just been that C9's been so far ahead that it doesn't matter that he got caught. But I think like when with Blabber's not playing as well and they're not super far ahead, then all of a sudden it becomes a super clear, noticeable issue. But it's been there the whole time, you know. So Sven's D tier for me. He's been D tier for me for like, I don't know. It was super obvious like in summer, and people just go, "Oh, he just had a bad summer," but I haven't seen any change in my personal opinion. If they funnel gold into him, then yeah, he's gonna like pop off. But I think any 80 carry should in that scenario. And Sajed, I have the same. I basically the same thing. I think, you know, if you feed him, he'll pop off, but he also gets caught sometimes. Yeah, and also with Sven, like for playing with Vulcan, I feel like obviously they don't super play for lane, but like I feel like he should be doing better in lane than he is. Like I feel like I never see him really win lane. And then next for support, I think Core JJ. He had a really bad Alistar game that I hated, but I think overall, some of his mage supports, I think like, he has the best Nami I think I've seen, and I think his Nico is also like, his Nico was solo one. It was 1v9 in that like Dignitas tiebreaker when TL was playing super bad, and I think like Core has actually been one of the biggest reasons that TL was made top 4 were doing as well as they were. I think he is their biggest source of playmaking. I think he's been, I think he, you know, a little bit of having the right picks, but I think he's been the best support. Vulcan, I think, has also been pretty good. Sort of playing the same picks that he was before, or that was meta before, right? The Bard, Nico, Rakan. I would have liked to see a little bit more in the Lion series, but I still think he's like top tier support. Pretty consistent. Huhi, I think, is really good at having those high impact games, and I want to put him in B, but his lane phase is just like, bro, come on, your laning is not at a world's level, and we've seen it before. I think, obviously, when he's playing with Stixxay, like Stixxay is not that good in lane, so it's not totally him, but I feel like he has really good engage sense, really good at finding those like Omega plays, but his laning is just not good enough to be B tier. Yeah. In sort of an opposite vein, I think Cryogen was really good in lane. Him and Masu were a pretty good bot lane duo. I liked it what I saw, but you know, his impact in the mid to late, maybe because he's playing mages, is not as high as I would like. Right? He and I also feel he is maybe champ pool issues, right? I feel like he was really good on like, he liked the Karma, the Nami, like the mage supports, but maybe once you get past those supports, he doesn't look as good. So, right, if he's not just playing for lane. So, question marks, need to see him against other opposition, right? It's going to be tough versus like Berserker. Lions, I feel like I like him. Similar, he likes to play like, he's still in the meta from last summer with the Rakan, the Nico, the Bard. You know, I feel like he finds the plays. He doesn't always find like the big games, but he will pull out like a big game. He will pull out like a good engage, a clutch engage every like other game. So I think he's a good support. I don't know if he'll be good enough for world level, but I think he's good for NA. Ignar, I mean, I feel like we just didn't get to see enough. I think he's coming back from military, right? So he obviously has a little bit of rust, but you know, him and FBI came in super late, right? They missed like the first series, and then they got eliminated before playoffs, so it's fine. We'll need to see him in the later series. Isles, everybody liked his Poppy game in finals. I mean, it was a good Poppy game, but overall, I think he's basically just been hard carried by Zerker. He doesn't look, he's like okay in lane, but like it's also because he's playing with Berserker, you know. And a lot of times he just picks for lane, and then he doesn't really do much in the mid to late. I don't feel like he has even on like the Nico or like a Bard or something. Like I feel like he's just taking it as a takeaway pick, and he's not actually doing that much with it. It's not having that much of an impact with it. So I think he's just getting hard carried. And then I think Seos. I think Seos is just bad. I thought he was bad on Shopify. I think he's bad now. I think he just got bailed out by his team overperforming before, and now he just remains to be bad. All right, so revisiting back. This is sort of my all pro. It's a lot of C9, a lot of Lion. Sentinel sort of runs out that like third team. TL has a really good bot lane, but I think the top side suffers from synergy issues still. Just Call Me was like a bright spot on Disguise mechanically. I have him sort of second just because I thought he looked so good mechanically. And yeah. All right, so that's my power rankings. I will do a team power ranking. I think I will wait until after the America's Cup. I'm maybe the international as well. Just because I'm happy just doing power rankings for players off of this, but my power ranking for teams is going to be a little bit more on how well I think they'll do in the future, whereas this one was more reflective on their past performance. So since my team one will be more about how I think they'll do like in the next couple splits, I will have that one after at least the America's Cup, if not the international. All right. Thank you for watching.